Alrighty, biker faithful. We've got a compilation of 8 different legal issues at play, so let's get started. Clearly, the crash isn't happening in America, but a crash is a crash. So, Pete, the first question we have to address here is when we take on a new case, we look at liability. Let's talk about what's happening in this video.
So this is a classic case of you've got danger all over the place. We have a pedestrian that just crossed the street, so you have to be mindful that she's not going to suddenly turn around and come back into your path. So that's not the most dangerous thing here, but you got to be mindful of it. The first immediate danger is this vehicle stopped on the left. But I mean, again, you've got multiple things going on here, so you really need to proceed into this intersection with a lot of caution. First thing I'm going to do is make sure the wheels on that white car are not rolling, because if so, he's the one that's the most dangerous to me. However, you can't lose sight of the fact that you've got a vehicle approaching the intersection from the opposite direction. So, I mean, you got two different things that can cause you serious harm here, and the wisest thing to do is slow down until you're sure that both of these motorists are going to stop, and obviously that the pedestrian isn't going to cut back into your path.
And then we see, doesn't quite pan out that way. Let's get to, boom, right there.
Sure as shit, you know. I mean, you got to assume that people are going to do the wrong thing. If you do that, you're going to keep yourself a lot healthier as a biker, because I can't even tell you how many times I've seen these scenarios where somebody's approaching a stop intersection, and if you just assume they're going to stop, you know, maybe you're right 99 times out of 100, but that one time that you're wrong, you're going to get just destroyed.
Fair. Alrighty. So here we have kind of this classic case.
Whoa.
Oop. Oofta. And there it goes. So we've all seen some crazy drivers on the road. You know, what do you do when somebody's driving like that around you? And Steve, let's back this up 10 seconds, and let's talk about this a little bit more. All right. So we're riding along
Right now.
Boom. Right there.
I mean, this guy's clearly out of control. He's not, I don't know what he did to cause his truck to start careening like that, but the instant that I mean, thankfully, I've never seen this myself, but the instant you see something like this, you need to be slowing down quickly. I mean, and of course, slowing down quickly out on a freeway means you better know what's behind you, because if you've got somebody riding your ass and all of a sudden you pound your brakes, the dude behind you is going to kill you. But assuming that you know somebody isn't right on your ass, you need to start slowing down hard as soon as you see something like this, because you just don't know what's going to happen. This guy is totally out of control. And obviously, if you come into contact with this thing, you're probably going to bite the dust.
And as we can see here, whoo, tips right over, keeps trying to correct, overcorrect, and out. And that'll do it. All right, so we call this one the underpass pileup. And as we're going to see here, we've got, it looks like an SUV and a Corvette under the SUV. I mean, you look at something like this, how do we even know what happened? You know, like, what kind of scenario leads to this, in your opinion?
Well, let's back up 10 seconds here.
Right.
So right there, I mean, it's impossible to know for sure what happened, but judging by the fact that we've got an SUV that's jacked up by a Corvette, and look at the angle of the SUV. Mm-hmm. It appears to me that the SUV did kind of a radical lane change that the Corvette wasn't expecting. And the SUV is probably going significantly slower than the Corvette. Again, just based on what we're seeing here on the video. So he cuts across the Corvette's lane. The Corvette's going significantly faster than the SUV. And boom, this is what you see. It just knifes right underneath the SUV.
Yeah, as we watch that angle, yeah, that's exactly where we'd expect this to come from. Here we are at coming through. Hello.
Damn.
We're gonna have to back that one up in a moment here, but look at that slow motion, just right into a concrete wall.
Yeah.
Holy crap. All right, let's back that one up 10 seconds, please, Steve. This one starts hot and fast, right? So what we see here, semi going, and right there. Right there. This SUV is doing basically a pit maneuver on itself, which I've never seen, frankly.
Well, and I mean, this is one of those deals where I don't even know if you get time to properly react to this, because right now, what I'm seeing, you can't tell that something terrible is about to happen, although you do have that gray vehicle cutting in front of the semi. But I mean, as the gray vehicle continues forward, yeah, see it. So right as it clears the front of the semi, all of a sudden it's like, holy shit. But you've got such limited time to react to this. And, you know, what's the right thing to do? Based on how close it was, if you're on a motorcycle, you might be best off if you just scooted right on through there. But because as you can see, as this continues to play out, you got shit flying all over the road. And I mean, when I say shit, look at that thing in the middle of the lane. That is a huge chunk of concrete, and that's going to bounce up into the air. Oh my God.
Oh.
I mean, this is just one of those.
There's that concrete chunk right there too. We look at it. Boom. Concrete chunk flying.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that alone will kill you, but there's just such limited time to react to that one. That's pretty frightening.
I say multiple chunks here. Yeah, this is a rough one. If you can get off onto the right shoulder and just clear through, that might be the best path in this one.
As a general rule, when you see shit like this that's about to go down, if you have time to get slowed down and stopped before, that's the thing to do. But this one happens so fast and so close, I really don't know if you do. I mean, this might be one of those where you cross your fingers and just pray that one of those big chunks of concrete doesn't take you out.
We entitled this one, Party's Over. As we can see, we got a night ride going and speeding real fast. Uh-oh, here we go, and all the way through. Now, luckily they landed, you know, upright, but let's take that back 10 seconds, please, Steve. Clearly speeding, decides they're going to pass in a no-pass zone. I mean, I look at something like this, and there's probably some drinking involved. It's late at night. Given how dangerous it can be to ride a motorcycle at night, is there an hour where we just need to get off the road to avoid these kinds of situations?
A drunk doing stupid shit, passing in a no passing zone on a curve, that's not necessarily limited to nighttime hours, you know? I mean, it's more likely that that's when you're going to encounter something like this, but I guess my concern about night riding doesn't have as much to do with drunks, although maybe it should. You know, I get more concerned about wildlife, but...
oh, yeah. Especially in the Midwest with deer, yeah.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I ride at night. I prefer not to, but I do. Something like this, you know, you got some dipshit passing in a no passing zone on a curve. I mean, this is the solution in most of the situations is when you see something going wrong, it's just time to start slowing down. So as the situation unfolds, you can control yourself. But yeah, clearly, as soon as you see that guy passing in a no passing zone, you know shit's not good.
Fair, fair. All right, here's a wild one. We call this hanging out. All right? Pretty simple scenario, right? All right, so looking at this real quick. Comes through, there is individual throwing a rope right across, and that rope is going to land over here, presumably in this person's hands, but wait.
Damn.
Takes him out, and there's the clothesline. Oof. Right there. Gets completely clotheslined by that rope. Whew. Like, let's say this individual who's like throwing this, I look at them, possibly a company vehicle, right? How does that work if this is, you know, an employee of the company and they do something like this with, you know, the hangman's noose, basically?
Yeah, well, if this is a situation where it's a company vehicle, the company is going to be responsible for what that guy just did. And it might not seem like a negligent move to toss a rope over a vehicle to secure a load, but I mean, bottom line is when you're doing something like that along a roadway, you gotta be sure nobody's coming before you start tossing ropes around. From the motorcyclist perspective, what this kind of reminds me of is riding down a street where there are parked cars, where you need to be aware that a door might come flying open at any instant, right, or a vehicle might pull away from the curb. But as you're approaching a vehicle like this and you see the guy out walking around on the side, I mean, this has the earmarks of caution, and who could anticipate that a noose is going to come flying over the top and clothesline you like that? But, you know, it's just another example of coming too close to a vehicle parked on the side of the road, especially with people moving around it, is super dangerous.
So I want to highlight here at the beginning of this video, we have a car passing along shoulder of the road, not necessarily something that should be done. And then, of course, another individual goes, okay, I can do that. Oops, not so much. Like, oof. now what you want to be doing. So let's talk a little bit about like shoulders and whether or not you're allowed to mess with that. Are you allowed to pass people on the shoulder? How does this work?
No.
Fair enough.
No.
Fair enough.
I mean, that's a perfect example of why. You know, you got a traffic jam and people get impatient.
Yeah.
And once people get impatient, they start doing stupid things, and that is a perfect example. We've got a case that kind of reminds me of this scenario, but man, when you're in a line of cars, you got to be watching out for people doing stupid shit like that guy just did. I mean, the dude driving the pickup truck probably isn't going to get hurt by that, but let me tell you what, if you're on a motorcycle and somebody does that, you know that's a bad situation.
Yeah, you're going to get wrecked if you're on a motorcycle and you get rear-ended like that. Alrighty, and this brings us to the final video. We call this one the Fourth Amendment rights.
And I've asked you numerous times for your information and you're refusing to do so.
I'm not refusing. If I committed a crime, I would absolutely give you my ID.
All right. You've been stopped for a traffic violation.
I got stopped for a GoPro on my helmet.
Alright, so what we have here already, GoPro running up here in the side, as you can see. Cops stopped for a traffic violation. GoPro individual is saying, no, you stopped me because I have a GoPro on my
I
helmet.
told you it's a traffic violation.
That's a violation. So go ahead and get your sergeant here.
Okay, I've told you it's a violation, so you're still refusing to produce your information.
If
when you've
you
been
can
informed that
articulate a crime that I have committed, I will ID. Until then, I do not have to ID.
Alright, so he's already saying, I'm not giving you my ID, I'm not going to give you information, unless you can tell me why you've stopped me, and saying it's a traffic violation is not something that is apparently enough for the biker with the GoPro to give him that
In
information.
fact, this is a violation of my Fourth Amendment right.
So then it brings up the Fourth Amendment right, which is protection from unreasonable search and seizure by the government.
Amendment right, and I am now invoking Title 18, Section 242.
And invoking Title 18, Section 242 as well.
242, deprivation of rights and the
Keep
color of
moving
law.
along here.
If you do one more movement without getting your sergeant here, you're.
Did you hear me?
Did you hear me? Get your sergeant here. I'm
I'm
done speaking to you. I told you
explaining.
I am done talking. I am now invoking my Fifth Amendment right to stay silent.
And there's that Fifth Amendment right, staying silent. Okay.
Failed to produce your information.
Then what? You're going to
You're
arrest
in
me?
jeopardy of being
So that'd
placed
be
under arrest.
kidnapping. And I already invoked Title
And calling it a kidnapping if the cop decides to
18,
arrest
Section
him.
242.
How is that kidnapping?
You'll find that out in court, sir.
And then saying he'll find it out in court. All right. So we look at something like this, and Steve, let's back it up out there. Looking at something like this, Pete, what do you think? The biker's doing right. What's he doing wrong?
I'm going to say the biker's doing almost everything wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, you go through that whole clip and this biker's spewing out all kinds of provisions of law, some of them completely obscure, which makes me wonder, is this biker a lawyer?
Right.
So he's giving bikers and lawyers a bad name at the same time. But in my opinion, this biker, whether he's a lawyer or not, he's being way over aggressive here to start refusing to show your ID in what is apparently a traffic stop. You're just asking for this cop. And you can see in the clip, the cop has a smirk on his face most of the time.
Right.
Because frankly, the biker is such an asshole. Listen, you get pulled over by a cop, maybe it's a legit traffic stop, maybe it's not. But the cop comes up and asks for your license. I mean, the cop is going to say that you violated the traffic laws.
Sure.
And so now you've refused to give your license. You've already got a problem.
Right.
So when you're stopped, there are certain things that you do need to do to comply with the cops. One of them is give them your license. Another is give them your registration. Another is give them your proof of insurance. And I mean, seriously, what's the problem with that? Especially, he says it's a traffic stop. It's like way over the top combative to start saying, no, it's not a traffic stop. You stopped me because of my GoPro. It's like the biker is just looking for trouble here.
Right. And the cops, he's telling the cop that it's going to be kidnapping. And it's no. If you get stopped, you're going to have to provide some basic information. That's just how it goes. There's nothing to be done about that. And that's not saying you're going to have to provide much more beyond that, but you are going to have to prove you have a license, you have insurance, you have the registration. Like, that's just basics.
Right. I mean, and again, this is so completely over the top. I mean, I'm not an advocate of giving in to a cop if they do start asking you a bunch of things they shouldn't.
Sure.
Start fishing around. I mean, we've talked before about how to handle that. It's
Right.
like, about the time this cop says, if he did, do you know why I stopped you? That's the time to simply say, I don't answer questions, or no, sir, I'm looking for you to tell me that. But if you get combative like this right away, you're just begging to get arrested. And again, this guy is so over the top, he might get arrested and taken in. I mean, it's hard for me to stand in the shoes of the cop and think what he might be thinking. But to me, it's either this dude that I've stopped is simply a complete asshole, or is this guy under the influence of something? Because the way he's reacting to this simple traffic stop is so out of proportion to what you would expect. I mean, the cop arguably has justification to require this guy to start giving him some field sobriety tests.
Right. And I look at something like this and I think, just because you have the ability to say, I don't want to answer questions, doesn't mean you have the ability to say, I'm not going to give you anything. You have to give some basic info, like just identification,
yes,
so that they know you're allowed to even be on the street. And if you can't do that, that's a problem. But the point with cops that I've seen over and over again, that we've advocated for over and over again, is that it needs to be passive resistance. It's saying, here's the identifying information and no more. That's it. That's all you're getting. Make your determination based on that. It's limiting the amount of information they have and limiting the interaction. This is so active that you're basically giving the cop just more and more reason to mess with you.
Yes.
Which is not what you want. It's not what you want. And cops don't go to law school, so if you quote obscure law at them, they have no idea what title, whatever, they don't know. And let's walk through your legal questions. Alrighty, Pete, so let's talk about the justice system. What is the definition of legal advice, and why are lawyers so hesitant to dip into it?
Well, I mean, legal advice, it's really pretty simple. It's a lawyer giving advice to a person. So the person has a problem, a question about some situation that's happened. So now you've got a lawyer that's not just some dude at the bar giving advice, but giving advice from a legal perspective based on the lawyer's knowledge. So, I mean, and are lawyers reluctant to give legal advice? I'd say, I mean, if you come into their office, come into my office and you are asking for legal advice, I'm not reluctant at all. But if we're hanging out in a bar and some dude just comes up and wants legal advice, that's where maybe lawyers are a little reluctant. And, you know, that's the situation of, hey man, call me at my office Monday.
Right. And it's separation, work-life balance, where if you're out and you're having fun, you don't want to be thinking about your job and what you have to do. You want to be able to relax as a lawyer. I get that.
Well, I mean, not only that, but if I'm out having a couple of adult beverages, or maybe more than a couple of adult beverages, that's not the time for me to start giving somebody legal advice. Sure. Because the advice I give at that point might be a little different than what I would say Monday morning in my office.
Sure. All right, moving on to the next question. What does it mean to treat a witness as hostile, and how often does that actually happen?
You know, so it sounds like really bad or aggressive, treating a witness as a hostile witness, but really what it means is it's a witness that is on the other side. Sure. It might, for example, in the cases that we handle, we're always representing the person that gets hurt in the crash. We're suing somebody. Mm-hmm. So when we're asking questions of the other driver, that other driver, by legal definition, is a hostile witness. It just means they're on the other side. It doesn't mean they're actually hostile. And the significance of it is, when I'm questioning a hostile witness, I can ask my questions differently. Everybody's probably seen TV shows where a lawyer will say, objection, leading question.
Right.
So the significance of a hostile witness is, with a hostile witness, I get to ask leading questions.
Sure.
Because that guy is hostile to the interests of my clients, and for that reason, I can ask the leading question as opposed to just giving him a blank check to say whatever the hell he wants to.
Fair. Now, we had a Facebook community member, and they asked, what exactly does precedent mean, and why is it important?
Precedent in the legal arena means that there is a court case decided somewhere that controls what's happening in the case right now. So typically you're talking about a decision by an appellate court on a point of law where now you're in trial and the trial judge is bound by that precedent in deciding the case or telling the jury how to decide the case.
Gotcha. And you set precedent with, every case that gets decided to a degree, yeah?
I'm going to say yes on the appeal level.
There we go. Okay.
So yeah, if it's an appellate decision, especially if it's the Supreme Court, then you've got some binding precedent.
So let's talk a little bit more about that appellate process. How does that work, and what exactly is an appeal?
An appeal comes after a trial. Once you've got your result from the trial, if one party is dissatisfied with what happened at trial for one reason or another, they do have the right to go to an appellate court and have the appellate court look at what happened and decide if it was appropriate.
And when we talk about like an unhappy scenario, like they didn't get the result they wanted, there needs to be a legal basis for this. Otherwise, it's not going to matter to the appellate court.
Well, you know what, and I've said this many, many times over the years when clients talk to me about appeals, and I tell them, I do not file boo-hoo appeals.
Yeah.
A boo-hoo appeal is from either direction. From my client's direction, it's that's not enough money. And from the defense direction, it's that's too much money.
Sure.
Those are boo-hoo appeals, and unless it is really wildly extreme, those appeals are going to fail. And what I tell people is you need a legal point, a legal error that happened at trial to really have a legitimate chance of having success on appeal. For example, if the judge allowed some evidence that shouldn't have been allowed into the case and it had a bad impact on the case, or maybe the judge gives a jury instruction that is not a correct statement of law, things like that, those are legitimate appeals.
Who hears an appeal? I know this sounds like a stupid question, but we get it all the time.
Yeah, it's not a stupid question at all. In Iowa, almost every appeal that you file is going to be heard by the Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court very rarely takes up an appeal right away from a trial decision. So you're going to be getting your first decision from the Court of Appeals.
What happens after an appeal, and can it be appealed again if you don't get the result you want from that?
Yeah, you know, and the way you say it, if you don't get the result you want, I mean, if you think that the appellate court also made an error, then you have the right to ask the Supreme Court for what's called a discretionary appeal.
Okay.
Well, you have the right to ask them. That doesn't mean you're going to get the appeal.
Sure.
The Supreme Court is going to tell you whether or not you are granted that appeal, and generally they're only going to grant the appeal if there are inconsistent precedents out there that they want to kind of wrap it up and make everything consistent, or if there's a constitutional law question, but there just aren't a lot of scenarios where the Supreme Court is going to grant a discretionary appeal. And frankly, almost never in a personal injury case.
Fair. So what's a mistrial, and why do those happen?
Mistrial means something happened during the trial that is so out of line, might be irrelevant, it might be something highly prejudicial, but somebody does something that is completely out of line, more often than not something they were told in advance not to do, that the judge, upon motion, will say, okay, that was not supposed to happen, it should have never been heard in the jury's presence, and it is so prejudicial that this trial's over, we're going to reboot and start over. And when you reboot and start over, that doesn't mean now.
Right.
It means, probably in 6 months or a year or something.
Sure. How does a judge decide if they're going to get a mistrial?
The classic case is there's something called a motion in limine, and I know that's just lawyer mumbo jumbo, but it's a motion that you file before the trial. And this is part of our job as lawyers, is to recognize these issues in our cases before we ever get to the courthouse in the first place. And you make a motion to the judge before the trial starts. It says, Judge, here are some things that this insurance lawyer might bring up during the trial that are so prejudicial, you need to tell him before the trial to not even bring this up, not even ask a question. Classic case. Every motorcycle case we have, if our client's not wearing a helmet, we file this motion to say, you cannot ask or bring up in any way, shape, or form that our client wasn't wearing a helmet. And we win that motion every single time in Iowa. So now we get into trial, and I've actually had this happen, where a witness gets up and they're testifying, and then they say something about,
And he wasn't wearing a helmet.
Objection, Judge, can we approach the bench? And we make a motion for mistrial, and the judge, who at that point is extremely pissed off, says,
Motion for mistrial granted.
it's a big deal. And that's the classic example. It doesn't have to be a helmet, it can be something else, but something the judge has said before the trial even started, you cannot talk about this. And then it happens that the mistrial is going to be granted almost every time.
Let's talk a little bit about what happens if a mistrial occurs. You know, let's say it gets scheduled out another year. When it gets scheduled out that following year, all the time in between, you know, is settlement back on the table?
Settlement can happen at any time, really. And I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I have seen settlements happen at pretty much every different juncture it could. I mean, a lot of people think that once a trial starts, settlement is impossible, but I mean, I've had cases get settled like after we get done picking the jury.
Okay.
I've had cases settle after all the evidence is submitted, but before the decision comes back. I've had cases settled while an appeal is going on. So really, you can settle a case at any time. It's about the only time, and I suppose even after an appeal decision, you could still have a settlement under certain circumstances, but seriously, up until the appeal is decided, I've seen cases get settled at every different juncture you can imagine.
Fair. If you've got any legal questions, email us at jonathan@thebikerlawyers.com and you just might find the answer next week. Now, let's shift up one more time. This week, we're featuring the Chrome Horse Saloon in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. From Wednesday's pizza night and Thursday's wing night to the weekend bands nearly every Friday and Saturday during riding season, this spot is always hopping with fellow bikers and good food. So make sure you stop by and grab a bite to eat when you rest and refuel. Now, do your community a favor and comment below to let us know your favorite biker businesses, and they may get featured here next week. Until next time, Rebels, ride with us.